maybe just say.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon, wherever you might be. We're very, very excited to have you all for our course taster today and give you a really good idea of not only what it's like to come on the course with us and become an APPI instructor, but what the opportunities will be like for you out in the industry as well. There's so much happening at the moment. There's lots going on and lots of different ways that you can enter the industry and be really successful. Sophie is one of our master educators here at Unite Health. So if you're based in Melbourne, you're very likely to have Sophie for some of your course days.
I pretty much live here.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, Sophie's just amazing. Do you want to tell a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you very much for that very generous introduction. So I have been with APPI since 2006. So I do have a lot of experience with this particular type of Pilates. And clearly, I really believe in it if I am still around almost 20 years later.
Yeah.
So I trained directly with Glenn and Elisa, who were the founders of APPI. They trained me back in the day in London. I worked with them at their flagship Pilates clinic in Northwest London in Hampstead. And since then they opened other clinics, and obviously their education institute has grown around the world. I've taught on APPI courses since 2007. I started in the UK. I was lucky enough to travel around Europe when I lived in London, and then I traveled around Brazil teaching APPI courses. I haven't been to the United States, but many of our course presenters taught in the United States. And then eventually when I moved back to Australia, I obviously continued here at Unite Health with Sarah, who's the director of Unite Health, and I have been friends since 2007.
Yep.
So we have a very long history. Yeah, I've worked here in the office for many years as well. I'm now currently just in an educator role, but I've been very involved with the business for a very long time. So I do really consider it like my business as well. I'm just one of the educators. So yeah, I used to be a physio. I'm no longer a physio. That wasn't for me, but I love teaching movement. I also teach dancing. So yeah, I love movement and I love breaking it down and teaching in lots of detail and hopefully really helping you to understand how the body works.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point as well. Like Sophie has that physiotherapist background. A lot of our course educators do, and that's really to ensure that you get the best quality education, but you as well really understand how the body moves and how you can be teaching people from all different backgrounds, different levels of Pilates, even managing anyone with injuries in your classes, which we're going to get into when we talk about the APPI method. So for anyone out there who doesn't know who I am, my name's Laura. I'm one of the course consultants here at Unite Health. So we may have already spoken on the phone. Otherwise, if you do book a time in to chat, it's most likely will be me or one of my colleagues on the other end where we can chat you through your journey, different delivery intakes and how it all works. So what we will do is basically get started. Sophie's going to run through the APPI method, a little bit about our history, and we're actually going to show you guys how we bring everything together on the course and actually teach the exercises so you can learn and kind of get a visual understanding of how that all works. Obviously, tonight is just a very small snippet of what you learn on the course. Our course is 14 days of training, but please stay on until the end. We have so many different promotions running at the moment. So there's 3 really important ones that I want to run through with you that you will be getting access to tonight for joining us. So stay on to the end. I'll jump back on after Soph has done our session. And if you have any questions, we will do a little live Q&A at the very end as well. So keep them all then and we'll run them through together.
Great.
Great. Perfect. Enjoy the session, everyone. I'll see you soon.
So just a little bit about APPI and how it's different, I suppose, to other training providers out there. Obviously, these days, Pilates is so popular. So there's so many options that you can choose for your training, but we have a fairly unique way of delivering the information to help you guys to become the best possible instructors. I've been, as I said, in the Pilates world for almost 20 years. And I feel like Pilates has lost a little bit of its true essence, if I'm honest. Joseph had principles of Pilates that were very clear in what made Pilates Pilates. And often when I go and do a class out there, I don't see those principles being shared with the class. So that's what we really focus on, in making sure that even though obviously Pilates is vastly different these days to how Joe originally commenced the method, many years ago, we still want to be true to the principles, because that's what makes Pilates Pilates. So we will teach you with those principles in mind. So that's one thing. We try and keep it to Pilates. It's not just a bunch of movements on a reformer to make your muscles burn. Of course, we want to get a workout, and that's one of the main motivators for many people to do Pilates, to get a bit of resistance training, to feel that nice toning effect in their body. And obviously Pilates can be great for that. However, when I go to classes and I see people demonstrating the movements with poor technique, I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, that person's just going to have the sorest neck at the end of this class. And there's a way that you can teach a very effective exercise and feel a very good burn without necessarily just loading up the springs. If you have to load your reformer that much to feel the work, you're probably just not doing it correctly. So just by tweaking technique, just to get that most efficient activation, you're going to change the way you feel Pilates in your own body, and how you're going to, and then that's going to obviously feed into your class. People come onto the course and like, wow, is that where you're meant to feel it? I've never felt it like that before. I was just teaching this afternoon and we were doing a reformer exercise, like cat arms and cat hips, and people think, oh my gosh, I've never felt it like that. And all of a sudden it became so much harder and so much more challenging, but in a good way, because they could really feel the burn, because they were doing it right. They were thinking about their alignment correctly. So we're really big on technique and precision is one of the Pilates principles. And we're really going to teach you as accurately as we can. So you're going to understand the movement in your own body really clearly. And that's the first step to then being able to teach. If you don't know in your own body how it works and how to align yourself, you're not going to be able to teach it to someone else. So the first part of the course is very much in you guys experiencing the movement in your own body, understanding our postural alignment. And that's what we're going to start with just in a moment, is talking about the APPI way of aligning the body. We talk about the 5 key elements, and this is fundamental to every single exercise you are going to teach as an APPI teacher. And it's also probably the most important information that you can give your clients to take into their day-to-day life, to have good postural awareness. And we know that if we have good postural awareness, whether we're sitting at a desk all day, whether you're standing behind a checkout counter all day, whether you're walking around the city all day, posture and movement is so important to keep our bodies healthy. So a lot of what you guys are going to do as Pilates teachers is really going to impact on people's lives and their general well-being. So even though you might be teaching that person Pilates once or twice a week, the information that you give to them can really make a massive difference to just their general well-being overall. So we really like to emphasize that general well-being and good just education of movement and health. I like to think of Pilates teachers that I train as promoters of health rather than just teachers of Pilates. Okay, so that's one thing. We're really trying to stick to the principles of why Pilates is different to other exercise. The other thing with APPI is that we have a very structured way of breaking down the movements to make it appropriate from absolute beginners all the way up to your high level clients. So of course, we've come from a clinical background. So a lot of the lower level exercises that we teach originally were designed with the clinical population in mind. However, remember that Pilates back in Joe's days was designed for ballerinas. So professional ballerinas at the New York City Ballet. So think about when you go and watch ballet, or if you've seen ballet on YouTube or whatever, ballerinas have this huge range of motion, incredible strength, incredible control, because they've been training their whole lives to be able to do that. The average person cannot do that. So even if you're fit and healthy and you don't have any injuries, it's very unlikely, unless you've trained as a ballerina or as a gymnast or as a martial artist or as somebody that requires these huge ranges of movement and lots of strength and control in those particular ranges, you're not going to be able to execute a lot of the traditional repertoire safely. Okay, now so if some of it you might be fine, but some of it you might not be. So the APPI method looks at the traditional movements. 9 of the movements have been contraindicated or taken out. Let's not talk about contraindication now because we're not talking with the clinical population, but they've been removed from the repertoire as being thought to not be that beneficial for the average person, shall we say. And the rest of the movements have been broken down into levels. So all of the movements will retain some characteristic of the original movement. However, there's different elements of that movement taken, which will make the different levels. And often the levels get progressively harder. Not always, sometimes they're just different elements. So in a moment, I'm going to show you what that looks like, how we go from the traditional movement, and then we break it down into our various movements and what principles we're using to do that. I know that I like to teach people to understand what makes a movement harder, what makes it easier, and what makes it different. Because it's really easy, guys, just to go onto a course and get a booklet with lots of exercises and just practice the exercises and then just regurgitate that information. But rote learning exercises is very different to understanding principles of movement and understanding ways that you can make an exercise harder or easier or just different. So we talk about principles like base of support and leverage and range of motion, that kind of thing, which sounds a bit complicated now, but we break it down and explain it to you. So we really make you teachers who think and who understand, and therefore you can make lots of modifications. So you can learn a million exercises that we won't go anywhere near on the course, and you'll be able to use the principles that we teach you on the course to then be able to modify for anyone down the track. Okay, so in a nutshell, APPI Pilates is for anybody, and there's always a way to make it more adaptive, more appropriate for that person, and you're going to understand why and how to change things. So we're going to start now, though, on just what the 5 key elements are. I'm going to take you through that. We're going to come into what we call the Pilates rest position, which is the first position that we start our Pilates in. Okay, and we start in this position because we have the most amount of contact with our body, in contact with the floor. Okay, so we've got a lovely base of support and we can feel the connection between the floor and our body. We know where our body is in space when we're on our back lying down. So that's where we're going to start. So we're going to start going through our 5 key elements on the mat, and then I'm going to bring that into a more functional position. And what do I mean by a more functional position? A position that we spend more time in our life in, because sadly, for most of us, we don't get to lie around on the floor most of the day. Sometimes on holidays, we get to do that, which is lovely. But in day-to-day life, we don't spend a lot of time lying down. So we do that in our Pilates class to learn where our body is, how to feel our body in space. And then we need to put those principles into that more functional position of sitting and standing, for example, which we spend more time in. So let's start with that, with our 5 key elements. So I'm just going to come down over here onto the mat. So you're going to lie down in our rest position. Now, in this position, I want you to imagine that you're lying on a set of train tracks. Okay, so you've got your feet and your sitting bones or your bottom bones and your shoulders are on these train tracks. Okay, your kneecaps are pointing straight up to the ceiling. All right, excuse me. And I want you just to feel that your rib cage is connected to the floor underneath you. All right. We're now going to go through the alignment of the different parts of our body, and this is essentially what the 5 key elements is going to be. All right. So we're going to start with our breathing. Okay, so breathing is one of our first principles of Pilates. Obviously, breathing is essential to life. We need to breathe to bring oxygen into our body to feed our muscles as we exercise. But it's also the mechanics of how we breathe also can affect the way your abdominals engage. It can affect the force that you produce through your body. It can affect the way you move. So we're teaching you a particular way of breathing, okay? And that's one of the 5 key elements. So I'm going to get you to actually interlace your fingers like this, okay? So you're going to pop just your fingertips like this, and you're going to pop them on your lower rib cage And just allow your elbows to kind of sink down to the floor either side of you. So that's what it will look like when I'm lying down over here on the mat. Okay, so we've got our fingertips interlaced there, elbows on the ground. Now here, I just want you to breathe normally for a moment. And just be aware of, excuse me, any movement that's happening in your rib cage. Just be aware of how you're breathing normally. You might not feel any movement underneath your hands at all. Some people naturally breathe and their tummy rises and falls. Some people naturally breathe and their chest rises and falls. Okay, so I just want you to be aware to start with where you might be moving from as you breathe. But how we want you to move when you breathe is as follows. You're going to breathe in and imagine that the air is coming down into your lungs and it's pushing, it's expanding your lungs, and the rib cage is pushing out sideways into where your hands are. So you're breathing in, and as you breathe in, the movement of your rib cage is going to cause your fingertips to separate. So as you breathe in, your fingertips will separate, and as you breathe out, they'll naturally come back together. So I don't want you to actually move your fingers in and out together. Try not to think about your hands. Try and direct the breath down deep, and then the air is going to push your rib cage out sideways. It's like a set of bellows expanding as they fill with air. Or a concertina file opening. If you think about a concertina file, I mean, that's a bit old school. Most people just file things on their computers now, but imagine a concertina file opening. That's, or an accordion. Imagine an accordion. That's the kind of movement that we want from our ribs as we breathe. So we're breathing in, feeling the rib cage pushing out wide and to the sides, and breathing out and feeling our fingertips join back together. So as you're breathing, your movement of your ribs is out and also kind of back into the mat, okay? Now, don't worry if you don't get the hang of that straight away. It's not the end of the world at all. It's just to make a point that even the way we breathe is important and can affect the way your abdominals are engaging. Okay, so that's our first key element, is our breathing. The second key element is centering. Okay, and centering has two components. Centering is activation of our deep core. To activate our deep core efficiently, we want to be in neutral spine position. Okay, so we're going to go through a process of that to start with. We're just going to flatten our back gently towards the floor and then arch your back. We're going to flatten it and arch it. So you should feel like you're almost giving your back a little bit of a massage in the mat as you do this. Just gently flattening the back and then creating an arch under your lower back. Okay, we're trying to keep our ribs heavy as we do that. And then I want you to settle in between those two positions. Okay, so imagine that there's just a little space now, or don't imagine, create a little space underneath your lower back and imagine that you can place a blueberry there, okay? And we want to hold on to that blueberry the entire time we're in this position. And this is our neutral spine. Why do we want you in neutral? Because in neutral, we have the most efficient activation of our deep core muscles, okay? To activate our deep core, I want you to imagine that your hip bones, these bony bits here on the front of your pelvis that you can feel, okay? I want you to imagine that there's a magnetic force between those hip bones and you're drawing those bones in towards each other. You can even pop your fingertips just in and down a couple of centimeters from those bony prominences there. Okay, and then as you engage or as you imagine that you're drawing your hip bones together, you're feeling some tension underneath your fingertips. Not a bulging, just a gentle tensioning. Okay, and that's engaging our center. It's quite a subtle activation. Obviously, on the course, we'll go through this in much more detail. It's just to give you a general idea. So whenever we talk about engaging our center during Pilates, that's the level of abdominal activation that we're talking about, okay? So that's our center. We're in our neutral pelvis now, and we have our center engaged. Our ribcage placement is also important and affects the stress that we place on our spine. So when we're on the mat, you want to imagine that your ribs are like melting into the floor, okay? Or you can imagine that there's a set of springs between your lower ribs and your hips. And we want to keep those springs on even tension as we move. So for example, when I move my arms overhead, if I'm not paying attention to my rib cage, my ribs will want to pop up like this. Okay, so when I'm thinking about my 5 key elements, my rib cage placement, I'm going to keep my rib cage connected to the mat as my arms go overhead. So you should see a difference between that and this. Okay, so that's also important in how your abdominals activate and the stress you place through your spine. And so keeping that rib cage heavy. Then when we think a little bit higher up the chain, we're going to lengthen through our collarbones. Okay, and imagine that your shoulder blades are sitting flat like 2 dinner plates underneath your spine, or underneath your rib cage rather. Okay, so we want to have a nice separation between our shoulder blades. We don't want our shoulder blades pinching together. We don't want our shoulder blades to be hunched forwards. We want them nice and neutral. Okay, and think about a little gap between your ears and your shoulders without having excessive tension. We don't want to be drawing our shoulders really hard down away from our ears. We just want to be conscious of creating a little space between our ears and our shoulders. And then finally, I want you to imagine that you have a right pitch between your chin and your chest. So you're just going to do this tiny little nod of your chin towards your chest. Pop your hand on the front of your throat and make sure that those muscles are nice and soft. We don't want to feel excessive tension through those muscles. Okay, we just want to have a nice softness there. Okay, and this is it. We're actually engaging the deepest muscle of our neck when we do this. It's called our deep neck flexors. It's kind of like the core muscles of your neck. So this chin nod action engages those deep neck flexors, which helps to support our neck. So if you're someone that when you're doing, crunches and things, you might be leading the movement with your neck like this. You might get a lot of neck and shoulder tension when you're doing your ab work. By learning how to engage your deep neck flexors and learning the correct technique of the movements, you're going to be able to eliminate and alleviate a lot of that discomfort that's really common when people do Pilates or other exercises in less efficient ways than what are ideal. Okay, so in summary, our 5 elements is our lateral breathing, or the sideways movement of the rib cage when we breathe. Centering, which is our neutral pelvis position and engagement of our deep tummy muscles or our transversus abdominis. You'll learn all the technical things on the course. We have our rib cage melting into the floor or connected to our hips with these imaginary springs, which reduces tension through our spine. Our collarbones are open, our shoulder blades are nice and flat underneath our back. And we've got a little space between our ears and our shoulders. So we're in a lovely posture of our shoulder blades. And then finally, we have this just very subtle chin nod, or imagine that we're holding a right pitch between our chin and our chest. And that's essentially our 5 key elements. Okay, so if I was to transfer that information, let's say to standing, yes, in the screen, that's good. All right, we'll just quickly go through the 5 key elements in standing. So I've got my feet underneath my hips. My knees are soft and straight. Okay, we can pop our hands on our hips now. And I want you to imagine that your pelvis is like a bucket of water. So if I do it like this, you might see better. I'm going to tip some water out the back of my bucket. And then I'm going to tip water out the front of my bucket. I tip out backwards and forwards. So in neutral, I don't want any water falling out of my bucket. So I'm just going to come again into sort of a midway position between those 2 points. That's my neutral here. Again, I've got that activation through my center here by imagining my hip bones drawing together, or I can imagine that I'm zipping up a pair of hips to jeans, anything that we're focusing on, a gentle activation of the lower part of our tummy. My ribs are stacked directly over my hips, okay? So I'm not flaring my ribs forward like this. I'm not like overcorrecting my posture. I've got my ribs connected to my hips via these imaginary springs. Shoulder blades are just creating a soft V on my back. I've got lovely open collarbones. And now in this position, I'm going to imagine that my head is like a helium balloon and it's floating up to the ceiling, creating a feeling of elongation through my spine. Okay, so that's like, in a nutshell, the 5 key elements in standing. Okay, so just by teaching your clients that, you're going to help them with their posture in a day-to-day situation. Okay, so 5 key elements is really important. I'm now going to just take you through one of our exercises and show you the different levels and try and explain a little bit about how we change things to make things harder or easier. And so we're going to do our side kick to start with. So let me show you what like the traditional side kick looks like. So it's up here, and then we're doing a big range of motion. Okay. So that's what our traditional Joseph Pilates side kick looks like. So now we have 5 levels. Okay, so level 1, we start with our knees bent. And we're just doing a little movement here with our knees bent. Level 2, we keep the bottom leg bent, straighten the top leg. And we kick forwards and back like this. Level 3, we have the bottom leg straight. Level 4, we lift the bottom leg. So now we're really starting to challenge our balance. And level 5, we come up to this position. But you can see that it's a lot more controlled and a smaller range. And I'm actually feeling my abdominals working a lot more doing this than what I was when I showed you the traditional version. So let me just break it down quickly. We're not going to go into a lot of detail, obviously, but just so you get an idea. So when we're lying on our side, we're once again going to consider our 5 key elements. So I like to think that I'm lying against a brick wall. So all of the points of my body that were a moment ago in contact with the floor are now in contact with this imaginary brick wall. That's going to help me to find my 5 key elements in this position, that I don't have as much feedback through my body because my base of support is narrower. Okay, so I've got my back of my head, my rib cage, my bottom, all in contact with that brick wall. Okay, now in side kick, our starting position, we're actually going to move our legs backwards a little bit. So we've got our feet just slightly forwards of our hips in this position. Now, whenever we're working on the mat, we're always controlling the position of our body against gravity. And in this position, gravity is coming down like this, and it's making me want to squash my waist into the floor. So I'm always going to think about sending this top hip down towards my feet, creating a little space underneath my waist, imagining that perhaps there's enough room for a little arm in advance to be able to walk through. So even though I'm lying down, this is still an active position. I'm controlling, control is another principle of Pilates. I'm controlling my body against the effect of gravity here. All right, so then we're going to hover the top leg up and then kick forwards and back. And I'm keeping my knee bent as I do that. I can imagine that I'm polishing the surface of a coffee table with the inner part of my leg. And the idea is to keep my ankle, knee, and hip all in alignment. Now, the muscle that I'm working predominantly here is my gluteus medius, my side bum muscle. Okay, we work this muscle a lot in Pilates. And I'm also really working through my core because I'm trying to keep my spine nice and still as I isolate the movement just to my hip. Okay, so in this exercise, if we're thinking about principles, I have a nice supported base of support. I feel balanced because this bottom leg is bent, and I have a short lever, which means this leg is bent. Okay, so my leg feels lighter because it's bent. Level 2, it's the same thing. I'm just going to straighten my leg. So you can imagine if you're doing it with me, you can feel that now your leg, does it feel a bit heavier? Because we've lengthened the lever. So when we talk about levers, I always like to imagine that I'm lifting a heavy box of books. And I want you to think, if you were to lift a heavy box of books, would it be easier if you kept the box of books close to your body, or if you held it out away from your body? It's easier when you hold it in, right? So when you straighten your leg, it's just like you're reaching that box of books away from you and you're lifting it there. So the lever is longer. Okay, so that's why level 2 is harder than level 1, because our leg is straight. Level 3 becomes a little more challenging because now we're going to straighten that bottom leg. So what does that do? It makes the base of support even skinnier. So it's harder to balance now. It's much easier for me to roll around because I've got that bottom leg straight. And then the top leg stays exactly the same. Okay, so the leverage stays the same, but it's a skinnier base of support. Level 4, we're going to make it even harder to balance because we're lifting up this bottom leg. So now we're kind of really just balancing on the side of our hip and underneath our ribs. So we really don't have much spot to balance on. Okay, so the other thing, I'm working more muscle now. I'm using my inner thighs at level 4. Okay, so you might see that my movement is getting smaller because it's harder to control. I have to use my core more here as well. And then finally, I'm coming up here. So once again, now I'm just literally balancing on the side of my hip. And of course, I'm using my forearm to help me as well. But now I have to push myself out of the floor to maintain my 5 key elements around my upper body. So I have to use my muscles around my shoulder blades, my upper body. My obliques are working much harder and my glute is still working. Okay, so I'm challenging my balance, I'm challenging my core, I'm challenging my upper body, okay, and my glutes. So that's our level 5. So hopefully you can see that there's a progression from our level 1 to our level 5. And that was very quick to explain, but we'll try and explain why everything gets harder and easier. And then those principles you can apply to any exercise that you teach out there. So we're going to equip you with the knowledge and the skills, make you really intelligent thinking teachers. So you can teach any movement, you can make up an exercise, or you can take other repertoire and then modify it. And then that's going to make Pilates suitable for everyone that you teach, regardless of their experience or their background. I'm going to leave you back with Laura now.
Oh, that was so good, Sophie. I love seeing the way that APPI break down the different levels of exercises because they are so applicable for everyone out there. We're all anatomically built differently. You know, I come from a line of long injuries where, you know, level 1 was my best friend for a long time whilst I got that strength back. But for me personally, those methods have got me out of a chronic pain state I was living in for a really long time. So they're very close to my heart. And I just love seeing the way that Sophie breaks it down and just makes it so easy to understand. So that's obviously a very small snippet of what you will learn on the course. I do now just want to share with you guys a little presentation about the course itself. Let me just open that one up for you. Just to give you guys a much deeper dive into what we cover on the course in terms of the course content, the structures, and how it all works. As I said, we do still have some exciting things to chat about at the end. So that is coming soon, I promise. So what is actually covered on the course? Now we start every single day with a Pilates class. It's just such a nice way to warm up for the day and get ready to learn. We do really, really easy to understand anatomy workshops, again, all delivered by our course educators with their allied health backgrounds, just to make it you know, as simple as possible. We do our full repertoire of mat work and reformer. So it is your beginner, intermediate and advanced level. So you can teach in all settings once you do finish the certification with us. How to safely and effectively structure your classes, teaching one-on-ones, small groups, larger groups. We also include small Pilates equipment workshops and the reformer jump board, so you can teach those classes as well. But one of the best parts of the training is learning about the industry too and knowing what those next steps are. So our graduates can feel really confident when entering the industry, whether that's as a casual instructor, full-time instructor, whether you want to go on and open your own business or studio one day. We do chat about this in the course as well. So you can take what applies to you and set yourself up for success and know those confident steps to take to get yourself where you need to be. So that's all included for you. We have a few different delivery options. So depending where you're located will help dictate this for you, and also depending on your schedule. So we try and keep these as flexible and as achievable as possible for everyone. So in all states, meaning Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Sydney, we run our part-time course. This one here is roughly 1 to 2 weekends per month, normally more than one a month. And we do weekends 1, 2, and 3 with you online via Zoom. This is our mat work and anatomy training. So we do that live, it's interactive. Sophie will be able to correct you on the screen, so don't worry about that. And we will reiterate that mat work training in person with you, as you've got 4 weekends following on from that in the studio with us on the Reformers. So that's generally about our 6-month course there. We do offer a fast-tracked option here in Melbourne. This is one of our studios here. We've got another one around the corner where you can come through and do all 14 days with us in person. It's one of the only courses in Australia, I think, you can do your mat anatomy reformer in that one block. So it's really popular. And yeah, sells out really quickly. So we actually have some final spots available in April coming up, which is super rare. So if you'd like to speed it up, we do have that one available. Another option which we offer in both Melbourne and Sydney is our hybrid. So we do the same first 3 weekends on Zoom as our part-time, but then rather than spreading out and doing another 4 weekends in person, you can actually join us for an 8-day intensive, which is normally around a Monday to Friday and then a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So just condensing the final 8 days of the course in that intensive environment. It's less time off work and it helps you speed it up. It's about 3.5 months rather than 6 months. And then finally, we do have a 100% online option if you maybe are living in those more regional areas or overseas anywhere and can't make it to a state near you to get the course done. So get in touch with us if you'd like to chat through any of those options as well. As we sort of mentioned here, we have 6 days of mat and anatomy on Zoom, 8 days of reformer in person. And one of the requirements you'll be working on outside of your course days with us will be your logbook hours. So we get so many questions on how to complete these hours. They're very straightforward. So we do structure them quite differently to other providers out there. We make them just really achievable and accessible for you. So there's some observation hours. We'll provide you with the online classes you can sit back and watch from home in your spare time. You'll have some self-practice hours to be logging in. So your weekly classes you're already going to, you can start logging them in from the day you enroll and secure your spot in the course. So a lot of our students are going to 3, 4, 5, 6, sometimes 7 classes a week. So they want that to go towards their certification. And then once you start the course, you've got your practice teaching hours you can begin. And that's just practicing onto your friends or family members around you at home, just to get that experience up and figure out where you may need some further support or guidance from our educators on your next course day. Once your logbook's all done and you've done your 14 days of training with us, you can come through then to sit your certification assessment. This one here, we have a theory component and a practical component. So the theory component is something you just complete from home. It is online. It is mainly multiple choice and short answer questions, and you can actually have your course manuals in front of you. So it is an open book assessment, which hopefully just takes the pressure off a little bit with that one.
Definitely. Everyone passes it, guys. It's definitely not as scary as it seems.
No, definitely not.
No.
And then your second component is your practical. So you'll design your own mat work and reformer class, and on the day you've booked in for, you'll bring through that person to teach a class onto. So just one person of your choice, and then our educators will just spot check you on a couple of the APPI exercises. Look, you only need to hit 70% or over to pass these assessments. So as Sophie said, you know, nearly almost everyone passes the first go. You can resit the assessment for a really small fee if anything does go wrong, but just know we really support you and set you up for success for these assessments. There's a lot of prep that goes behind the training and everything to get you to that day to come through and pass with flying colours. So keep that all in mind as well. And then finally, we will get to a big thank you for today for joining everyone. So there's a few things going on here. First up, I want to let everybody know if you do book in by the end of this month, you will actually go in the draw to win back your full course fees. So one lucky winner will become a Pilates instructor for free. So it's really, really exciting. Get your bookings in before that date, and then hopefully you'll be the winner. But on top of that, any person that does enroll into the course in March, so everyone is really a winner this month, you will also receive free access to our mindfulness, meditation and breathwork course for 30 days. And this one's valued at $249. It's a really great way to start learning this. It is related back to Pilates, and it can be really helpful when you're starting your classes, introducing, doing your cool downs, whatever it might be. So you will receive a 30-day free access to that course if you book by the end of the month. And then on top of all of that, we do have a special offer for everyone that's here today. So if you are to book in by this Sunday, you will save an additional $200 on our course cost. So that will bring it down to $4,795 if you're looking at the upfront payment. That's about a $1,600 savings in total, as it is currently reduced at the moment. So lots and lots happening this month. There are payment plans there as well if you would prefer to spread the costs out. But I really encourage you, if you haven't already, to book a time to chat with us, just so we can go through the best experience for you and find an intake that works and is suitable, so you can get started sooner rather than later. But I'd love to hear everybody's questions, whether it's for myself or for Sophie. We really would love to hear from you if there's anything that's just really on your mind that you're not sure about, that maybe wasn't covered today, that you're really sort of dying to know. We'll use these last couple of minutes just to hang out and yeah, if there's anything that comes through that you'd really, really like to know from either one of our educators. This is such a great opportunity to speak one-on-one with an amazing educator, one of our best educators here. Or if you have any really sort of course questions or questions about intakes coming up as well, do let me know. So feel free to pop them through on the chat. We would love to hear from you. And yeah, just so everyone does know, we do have final spots available for courses starting this weekend if you're just ready to jump in. Otherwise, our next start dates are happening in April. So we've got some time. That goes for our weekend only, our hybrid, intensive here in Melbourne. So there's lots of different choices to choose from. We haven't had any questions come through, so I'm just going to assume that we've answered everything for everyone, which is always a really good sign on a course taster. So that's great to know. Look, we will stay on. Oh, look, we've got a question from Liam. So do all Pilates classes count towards the logbook required for the certification, or only certain studios? So all classes. We don't mind what studio you're practicing at, whether you're doing classes at home as well. They can be online classes if that's easier. Your regular style of practice is absolutely fine by us. So feel free to log absolutely everything in there.
And I think, Laura, it's correct to assume that you can actually start logging your classes before you even start your training.
Definitely.
So you can backdate some of your training.
From the day that you enroll into the course, you can absolutely start logging in your self-practice hours. You can also start your observation hours as well. So a lot of our students come in with already ticking off a few of those requirements. Hi, Alexandra. Thanks so much for your question. Yes, we do have a part-time option in Melbourne. The next one starts in April, and that's one weekend a month. So I think that one's wrapping up around September time. So definitely we've got our part-time available here in Melbourne, as every other state as well. Fantastic. Well, do let us know if there's anything else that comes through. We're really, really happy to answer anything that you're not sure of. Otherwise, we hope you guys have such a beautiful evening. We hope you're feeling really inspired and excited to get started as well. I can only speak for myself when I say that the course made a huge impact on my life and changed the way that I live, which, you know, it's been the best thing ever. It's why I work in the job that I do. I just love the industry itself. So yeah, I can honestly say it definitely wouldn't be a decision that any of you would look back and regret.
Definitely not. We're getting so many people switching from like corporate hustle and bustle to a meaningful job where they're actually making a difference to people's lives. And
Yeah.
of course, like any job you do makes a difference in some way, but it's a difference that you can perceive. You know, you can
Yeah.
see the energy in people when they leave your class. You might see them come in super stressed after work, and they leave and they're just enlightened. And when that client comes up to you, they go, oh, I feel so much better. Thank you so much. I just had the best. That was what I needed. It just, and you leave work with a spring in your step,
Yeah.
you know? So when you can really make a perceivable difference to someone's day, it is a really good feeling.
Yeah, it's really rewarding. And I
So,
think
very rewarding.
people forget about that as well. I know that I'm the friend that everyone calls now when they've got something wrong with them. So I love being able to share that with my friends and family and know how the body is working and just fall back on those key elements and those methods. So it's super fascinating, and obviously will open up so many opportunities and pathways for you guys. And we can't wait to be a part of that. So have the best evening ever. We won't keep you any longer, but thank you so much for joining us, and please get in touch if you have absolutely any questions. Thanks so much, everybody.
See ya.